Everyone thinks they know why you cannot tweet from Beijing. We blame the censorship. We blame the Great Firewall. We imagine a guy in a government office simply hitting the delete button on sensitive posts. But that is the easy answer, and it is wrong. The real reason Western tech giants like Facebook and X are locked out of China is not just about what you say. It is about who owns the digital ground you are standing on. See, censorship is a content problem. But China has spent the last decade solving a much harder problem: control of the data itself. To operate in China, you would not just need to filter keywords. You would need to hand over the data exhaust of hundreds of millions of users to a completely different legal system. We are talking about the raw social graph, location trails, and private messages. And starting in 2025, the rules for this have tightened into a stranglehold. This is the concept of data sovereignty. It treats information exactly like physical territory. Just like a country controls its land and its airspace, Beijing demands total control over every byte generated within its borders. Under a complex web of laws, data generated in China must, by default, live under Chinese jurisdiction, on Chinese soil, and subject to Chinese regulators. It is a digital border that is just as hard as a physical one. But here is the part nobody expected. This isn't just one rule. It is a dense stack of statutes called the three-law tripod. First, the cybersecurity law. Second, the data security law. And third, the personal information protection law, or PIPL. Together, they define who controls data, where it lives, and when it can cross the border. And for a company like Meta, this tripod is a business model breaker. Let's zoom in on the cybersecurity law. It created a category called critical information infrastructure operators. If you run systems in finance, energy, or telecom, you are on the list. But here's the catch. Facebook's scale service plays such a huge role in public opinion, it would almost certainly be treated as critical infrastructure. That means Chinese user data cannot just sit in a California data center. It has to physically stay in China. And the stakes get even higher with the data security law. This law introduced two scary terms: important data and core data. Important data is anything that could affect national security or the economy. Core data is a tier above that. If you leak core data, it is not just a fine. It is criminal liability. We are talking about executives potentially facing prison time. And the definition of what counts as important, that is the billion-dollar gray area. Regulators never published a complete list of what counts as important data. It is ambiguous on purpose. It could be high-resolution maps. It could be logistics data. It could be behavioral trends from a social app. This forces companies to guess. And if you guess wrong, and the Cyberspace Administration decides your data set was important after the fact, every export you made to an overseas server becomes a retroactive crime. So say you want to move data out of China. It is not as simple as clicking send. It is like sitting for an exam you cannot afford to fail. As of 2025, significant transfers must go through a state-run security assessment. This isn't a box-ticking exercise. It is a political risk review. They look at the volume, the recipient, and whether the transfer could endanger national security. Most companies just give up and ring-fence China completely. This leads to a massive technical headache. You don't just spin up a cloud server and call it a day. You have to architect a parallel universe. A China-only version of your product where user data lives onshore, segregated from your global systems. Separate code branches, isolated databases, custom disaster recovery. It destroys the network effects that global platforms rely on. But here is the strategic twist that changes everything. While we have been focused on China's walls, Washington has started using Beijing's playbook. Look at TikTok. The US government talks about TikTok exactly the way Beijing talks about Facebook. They see it as a national security risk wrapped around a foreign data center. They argue that Chinese ownership allows Beijing to tap into the data of 170 million Americans. This logic gave birth to Project Texas. This is TikTok's $1.5 billion plan to route all US user data through servers run by Oracle, right here in America. Oracle gets to monitor the code. Oracle gets to inspect the data flows. It is literally data localization, American style. The US is demanding that TikTok park American data under American regulators or face a total ban. And this brings us to the real stakes for the future of the internet. We are moving away from a global World Wide Web. We are moving toward the splinternet. Policymakers now view data as a strategic asset, like oil reserves or semiconductor factories. They believe that whoever controls the servers and the engineers controls the risk. Infrastructure has become geopolitics by other means. So the new default is this: any large platform operating across borders must assume that every major government will eventually demand local storage, local audits, and local kill switches. Data centers, content moderation teams, and recommendation engines now must be physically and legally anchored to a flag. It is not just a cloud region label and a console dropdown anymore. It is a question of national loyalty. If you are a tech giant, the cost of doing business just went up. You are not building one product for the world. You are building a federation of local products, each trapped behind its own legal wall. The dream of a borderless internet is fading. In its place, we have a world where data needs a passport to travel. This story is moving fast, and the rules for 2026 are already being written. If you want to understand how this fragmentation changes the apps on your phone, hit that subscribe button. And tell me in the comments, do you think data localization makes you safer or just less connected? I'll see you in the next one.